You pull out a pack of Newports and you're like, Newports, huh? Typical. And he said it, and this guy is like in awe of you. You get out of the car and he looks at you and he says, this is how he tells the story. He goes, dude, you're Mike the cop. And you're like, yeah, what do you got, man? Like, I want to go home. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Alpha Standard Podcast, episode 2, with my man, the artist, formerly known as Mike the Cop.
Episode 2?
Episode 2. Yeah.
Dang, okay.
Yeah, bro. You're very important to me.
I thought you were on like 20.
Yeah, in my mind. Yeah. We're trying to get these guys on Instagram that are like, I got some people messaging me wanting to come on, and then they think they're like Beyonce with their schedules. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's hilarious. But no, it's good. We got some traction going. But my man, Mike Edwards, thank you for coming on, bro. I know you're a busy man. I appreciate it.
Super busy.
I won't apologize. This is how this podcast is going to go. So, my brother, I want to start with just a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, and then we'll start diving into your former law enforcement career, and then I want to get into faith, your ministry, family, fatherhood, masculinity, this day and age, all that good stuff. Cool. I want these people to hear your take on those things. I think you got some very important things to share. And
my take is the right take.
Exactly. There is no other. I want you guys to get that just clear right now. So where'd you grow up, brother?
Well, I mean, I was born in Missouri and then moved around. Apparently, I don't remember it, but born in Missouri, moved to Texas, then back to Michigan, where my parents grew up for a hot second, then to Illinois. And Illinois is where my first like memories are.
Right on.
My dad was an assistant pastor at a church there. And then I think it stuck with me more because some friends that we had there, we went back to Illinois like every summer.
Okay.
Or like that was like our vacation, was going to hang out and visit friends.
Love it.
You know, that kind of a thing with those people. So yeah, Illinois was like the first real memory of growing up. And then moved back to Michigan when I was 5, maybe. I don't know. Don't remember the exact date on that one. And then, came downriver. And we moved around a lot. So sometimes into Monroe County. But for the most part, especially from like junior high on, it was kind of like downriver rat.
Right on.
For sure.
Where'd you graduate high school?
Carlson.
Okay, right. I didn't know that. Right on, man. Did you move mostly because your dad's position with the churches, or like work and things of that nature?
I don't think so. I think we were just broke.
Yeah, like everybody back then, right? Yeah.
So
house to
maybe
house.
The first thing, we lived in my grandma's basement when we moved back, and then we moved into a rental. You know, actually in a neighborhood that I bought a house where my kids grew up.
Right on.
Just a few streets over from there. But yeah, we. We lived there in a rental, and then finally got a house in Carlton. My grandmother got breast cancer, and so my mom was pretty committed to helping take care of her. Mm-hmm. We ended up building an addition onto their house in Maybe.
Oh, right on.
And lived there for a season. She died, and then from there, I'd have to sit down and I've actually never done this. I kind of like walk through my dad's experiences in terms of like what was leading to what.
Right.
All I know is we ended up from there, we lived in a trailer for a season. Me and my brother slept under a computer desk in my aunt and uncle's trailer until I don't know whether it was available or just saved up the money or whatever it was. We lived in an apartment after that in Flat Rock, and that was like, me and my brother were on a sleeping bag in my parents' bedroom for that whole time. Like, because it was a 2-bedroom, but the 1 bedroom was where our boxes were, like
right.
Our stuff was.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and then it seems like my dad's career or making money must have taken a turn about then, because we got a house when I was in junior high.
Okay.
In Brownstown.
So you were like 10, 11, 12 years old at this time, somewhere in that range?
However old, a 7th grader.
Yeah, okay, I got you. 12, 13 years old.
something like that.
And your brother, just your brother, or any more siblings?
No, just
Just
us.
your brother. And you guys are how many years apart?
2.5.
2.5. Okay, so you guys were close. Yeah. Right on, man. And your dad was in ministry this whole time?
Yeah, always at least on a part-time basis.
Beautiful.
Not always on a full-time, like a full-time.
But always heavily involved in the church and things like that.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's how your whole childhood was?
Yeah, for the most part.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
What was that like for you guys? I didn't grow up in church. We've had this conversation off camera, but what was that like for you guys? When you were kids, was it like, were you proud of it? Was it just everyday life, or was it just kind of whatever, but this is what we do?
Yeah, I guess it was just what I knew.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known any different. I didn't really hang out with people who weren't.
Yeah, in like your
Church.
church groups, yeah.
So I was pretty much in a bubble
Yeah.
until high school. Not that I never, we didn't,
Of course. Yeah.
we didn't like grow our own food, and we went to the grocery store and stuff. But you get what I'm saying. Like, as far as my interaction,
Yeah, in social circles.
in school and stuff like that, I didn't really have a lot of significant connections to people who weren't, in the
Right.
church or church type people.
Right on, man.
Yeah.
Right on, dude. Catholic school, or was it all public school?
No, it was all. I only went to public school. I went in 2nd grade and 5th grade was public school.
Okay.
The other was a private school. Who's the lady that ran it? I think she was Catholic, but then I went to a Baptist school for junior high, and then started in public school after that.
Good buddy of mine went to Baptist Park when we were at Gilead.
Yeah, that's where I went.
Is that where you went?
7th and 8th grade.
No way.
Yeah.
Yeah, my buddy. Well, you know his father. He worked with your brother at Taylor PD, Joel Pinniger.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's my buddy Clay. That's where they went to school, and then we met. I think in the 7th or 8th grade, he came over to Allen Park, is where we met, and
Nice.
we've been best buds ever since. But yeah, they went to Baptist Park. Small world, man. So yeah, dude, you get out of high school, and then what was the journey from high school to college, or
Yeah, I went to University of Detroit.
okay?
Got a scholarship there, and I had no idea what I really wanted to do.
Right.
Right. Like, I had worked for some doctors and chiropractors, and my mom had doctor's appointments all the time. So like, I took her on all those doctor's appointments. So like, the medical world was kind of like that. I mean, my mom definitely wanted me to be a doctor.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, sounds good to me. Like, sounds
Yeah,
good to me.
cool
Like,
enough,
I don't
right?
know, but getting like a D+ in genetics my first semester was like, I don't know, man. Like,
This might not be for me, bro.
it could have been all the alcohol that contributed to that.
It always plays a role.
It may have had a small amount to do with my grades the first semester. But at the end of the day, I'm just like, man, this doesn't, like, I don't think I want to go down this road,
It wasn't really
I'm like,
tugging at you.
I don't know. So, yeah, I was like, well, what do I like to do? I love to argue. I love to read. I love to write. And so, I think that second semester, if it wasn't the second semester of my freshman year, it was like before my sophomore year, I declared philosophy as the major, whatever,
Right on.
for my BA. So yeah, I spent the next 3 years hanging around priests and philosophers, and
And you have that degree in that.
Yeah.
Right on, man. I didn't know that. That's awesome. That explains a few things for
Yeah.
sure. Well, I mean, you're extremely, like, I've never seen someone be able to articulate your point in such a concise manner, especially via social media.
yeah.
Like, your ability to, when I get to sit down with you and watch you do it in person, it's even better. But being able to put it into text when you're having a debate with someone, say, on a Facebook post, right, or something like that, I've always found that incredible about you. Because I'll be reading it and I'll be like, wow, I feel like I can hear you talking. It's not easy to do when you're typing things, right? You know what I mean? So that's incredible, man. So you get out of college 22, 23, somewhere in that range.
I started when I was 17, graduated in 97. So I'd have been 21, actually.
Right on.
Yeah.
And then you got married at what age?
20? 19?
Were you guys
19?
high school sweethearts?
No. I mean, I wished we were. Like I was trying to be.
Yeah.
She wasn't.
It's funny how that works, dude.
So
You had to
yeah,
make,
no,
she made you earn it.
we were good. We were really good friends, close friends in high school. I actually knew her step family from growing up. So
Okay.
like the church that my dad pastored, starting when I was like 8. So I grew up with her stepsister,
Right on.
and her stepmom and stepbrother and other stepsister. So like I already knew. I've known her step family longer than she has.
Right on.
So when she came into the picture, her and her dad, and to some degree her sister, but when they started coming around, because her dad started dating her stepmom, obviously, and her stepmom was part of our church. So dad
So you
started
guys have
coming,
been
she started
intertwined
coming.
without even realizing it for
Yeah, so
many
then
years.
we realized, like, so we met at church, but then we realized we went to the same high school. And so, yeah, we built a really good friendship through high school, but we didn't start dating until the summer after my freshman year in college. Yeah. So from there, then things moved pretty quick. We were
I was going to say, then I just boom.
engaged
Yeah.
by that December, married a year later. Yeah. So we got started.
How many years married now?
29 and January, February, 29 and 4 months.
Beautiful, man. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Man. That is absolutely incredible. And then, so we get married and you finish college. What are you doing for work? Just odd jobs while you're in college? Because you guys had your first child pretty early on, right? Or did you wait a few years?
Yeah,
And then
97, we had our first. And I graduated from college in 97.
right. So yeah.
So yeah, it was it was crazy. But what was the question?
When you were in college, were you just doing odd jobs to kind of keep yourself afloat?
Yeah, I worked for the most part for a chiropractor.
Okay.
At his office, and so that was, I think, was early in college, and then I got a job during college at Meyer, working in loss prevention.
Yeah.
And so I worked in loss prevention,
Just out there doing the Lord's work, baby.
and then I worked also part time at our church's like daycare school.
Okay. Right on.
So yeah, I had that youthful energy because I was in school with a full-time class load.
Mm-hmm.
I had ways to negotiate with my professors. I worked it out to where I could basically do what people would call now remote learning.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just said, like, why do I need to go to class? All we're doing is reading this book and I'm writing a paper. Like, let me just do that.
Yeah.
And I got them all on board. And so I would work midnights at Meyer. And then since I can't be fired now, I can say like I use their word processor to like write all my papers, and I would try to catch my shoplifters when the prime shoplifting times was. But like 3 a.m, man, I was just like reading my books and doing my homework, and then I would go home, sleep for a couple hours, get up, go work at the school from 11 to 3, come home, sleep again,
And back to shift again.
So
Yeah, man. I did similar. I finished my degree. I was working for a police department when I came back from Virginia, and they had a education requirement when I got hired in. I didn't have a degree, so I spent 15 months working their jail, and I went to online school on midnights, and then I was training new guys too at the same time. So I had a couple years of experience. So I'd be sitting in the jail booking inmates, training a new guy, writing up doors, and I'd be typing up my papers and things like that to get through my CJ degree on midnights. Yeah, and then there was like hybrid back then, so I'd have to show up to class every now and again or whatever. Go home, sleep for an hour or two, go to do that, and go back to shift.
Right.
Right on, man. So 97, you have your firstborn. You're fresh out of college, and what did you do? You didn't get into law enforcement until a little later in life, correct?
Oh yeah, it was quite a while later. Yeah, I didn't get into law enforcement until 2009.
Wow. So what, from 97 to 09, what did Mike do? Like, what was your walk?
I mean, I continued to work for Meyer, and then we took an opportunity in 2001 and 2002 to go to Costa Rica, and we had a lifelong friend that was a missionary there since the 60s. Had started a Christian school, or a private school, basically, that was like a very high ranking school in the country as far as like private education goes. And his son was coming back to the States to do some fundraising, and so he said you should come down and fill his spot while he's up here.
That's awesome.
And yeah, we stayed in there. I mean, they rented a house there, but like we stayed there, and so we did that. And then I went back to work for Meyer when I came back from that experience. That was like a year-long commitment.
Right on.
And then I worked at a bank. I started as a float teller and eventually got into mortgage processing department. So I worked for
This back then, before we get into what you're doing now.
yeah,
Right on.
yeah,
No way.
hated it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was in a cubicle with just stacks of, and not envelopes, manila folders, you know, whatever, just stacks of just documentation, because even 2002, 2003, it still wasn't super online applications, things
No,
like that.
yeah.
That was still
People
not
still having conversations face to face. Yeah.
yeah, and still not a common thing, right? So I had to do all of the entry. We put it into computers. So I was like basically started in the mortgage department, but as essentially
Data
data
entry.
entry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
so
brutal.
It was extremely brutal.
That's brutal.
Like, yeah, I never wanted to actually harm myself, but that was a low point. Like,
There was a small thought every now and again.
dude, it was
6 hours into the shift.
terrible. Like, I don't know how people can like exist doing cubicle work. It
Takes a special breed of person to do something like that.
it's just yeah, that's some soul sucking stuff right there. So I remember on like lunch break one day, I went and got whatever from a party store, you know, and they had magazine racks, and I saw this entrepreneur magazine, and I just picked it up, and I picked up Entrepreneur magazine, and I started reading through it, and I was like, well, this is interesting.
Yeah.
Like, people working for themselves. And I actually saw like a course. I want to say, dude, it was like $25, something stupid, right? Maybe 50. And it was window washing. So
Like how to start your own window washing business. Right.
so I got this course, and now I look at it, I'm like, man, these guys were way ahead of their time,
Yeah.
because it was like I logged online, and there was like videos of them
really? Back then?
showing their equipment. Yep. Showing how to price jobs, showing how to clean a window. And so I just started practicing. And so I had to work every other Saturday at the bank.
Okay.
So every other Saturday, I just would go door to door to businesses, right? I would just walk in. I printed business cards with my dad's printer, and he had like business card stock.
Nice.
I came up with a business name and logo and put it together, and I would just write the code on the back of like a 7-Eleven or a Subway or whatever. Like, hey, I don't know if you have anybody doing your windows, but I just started my own business, and this is what I would charge. Cool. And so people started saying yes.
Right on.
And it took me less than a month to replace my income at the bank.
No way.
Yeah.
Dude,
So-
that's incredible.
So, you know, a mindset shift unlocked for me then, which is like, I'm never afraid. Like, from that moment on, I've never been afraid of money. Like, in terms of like, I'm
Like
not
a scarcity
I'm not the
mindset?
richest dude. I've got a lot. I still have so much to learn. So much.
Of course.
But from that moment on, I was like, I don't have like this cubicle life that people think they have to do. It's just not true. They don't have to do that. So, yeah, then I went into residential stuff, and I built that up. And then somehow I came across a lady that she had lost a ton of weight on Weight Watchers and got hired by Weight Watchers to like run locations. And she had a window washing business, and it was generating like 40 grand a year in revenue. And so I bought it. I don't even remember what I bought it for, to be honest with you, but I bought her whole book of business.
Right on.
And just started like going to meet the clients, trying to get the jobs. I kept most of the clients probably.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what I did for a number of years, was just grow and develop that window washing business. And yeah,
That's incredible, man.
yeah. And then in 2005, I took a position at a church. That was a very young church plant. So I did that and kept. I
Running
had
a
an
business.
employee to do a lot of the jobs, and then I did side jobs. I would do the bigger ones. Like I had some big commercial clients. Like you do them 2 times a year for like $1,100 a piece. That
Nice.
kind of a thing. But it's like, and it's an all day job,
Right.
To do these buildings or whatever. So, yeah, I had kind of like a hybrid. To have my ministry job, and then I had my window washing gig. And then when the economy took a dump in 2008, my job came to an end at the church. The window washing thing was, I was losing clients left and right. That because they were losing their houses,
Literally, right,
businesses. Everybody's like, "Oh, I'm not paying to get my windows clean. I got better things to do
The
with my money."
expendable
right
income,
now."
yeah,
So,
exactly.
Which it didn't die. It just it had impacted me enough that it was like, either I love this business so much, I want to I have to lean into trying to get more clients in this environment, or I've got to pivot. And at that time, a friend of mine showed up at my door because he was in town for work, and it turns out he was a professional blackjack player on a team of card counting Christians. And,
Card counting Christians.
yeah.
I love it.
there is a Netflix documentary about us, actually.
No way.
Yeah. What was it called? I can't remember what it's. I actually can't even remember what it's called. But the true story of card counting Christians. Yeah.
And you jump in with this guy.
I'm in there with my face blurred as Eddie.
Fast Eddie.
Because at the time I was considering going into policing.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't know how this is going to look on the background. So I'm like, I'm just going to put me on the down low, in this thing. I'm happy to be a part of it or whatever. But so yeah, I actually transitioned into a professional card counting team and did that pretty from part of 2007 to 2000, close to 2 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
You guys are generating some revenue, traveling around.
yeah, I mean, it paid the bills for a while, and
Local, you go Vegas, all
over the
over. Yeah. That's awesome. How many of you were there?
it floated, but anywhere from 15 to 30,
Right on.
depending. So yeah, did that, and then I was like, well, I'm not going to keep this up forever. I didn't I had 4 kids at home, and
Right.
I'm like, I can't keep. And it was nice because I would travel for 3 days at a time, and when I was home, I was home.
Mhm.
I
that's
didn't have
big
another
plus.
job that I had to go to. So, so it was nice, but traveling that often for that long was, it was a grind. So that's when I was like, I gotta do something here.
Yeah.
I can't keep that up forever. And yeah, that's when law enforcement came onto the radar.
Police work, baby.
Yeah.
And how old were you when you first got on the job?
33.
33 years old going on the job. 2009.
Mm-hmm.
Were you with one department the whole time you were on the job, or did you bounce a couple of places?
No, I moved. I got into the academy, graduated November, and then was in the process. I was in the process for a couple places, but Oak Park was the first one to call.
Oak Park, right on.
Yeah.
Were you full time there?
Yeah.
Right on. Do they still have full time guys?
Yeah.
I think they still do, right? It's pretty. Is it pretty small? Or am I thinking of Hazel Park?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how they compare size wise. I mean, it wasn't like a massive department, but not tiny either.
How was the academy for you at that age? You having children at home, and you're probably in the academy with young guys, 21, 22 years old?
Yeah, I would say most of the guys were in there. I mean, a lot of times people get their degree,
True, too.
and then come to the academy. So there was and you got to be over 21 anyway.
Right.
So, I mean, I didn't feel too crazy old. There was older than me in the academy. I had,
Oh, right on.
I had quite a few people who were my age or a little bit older.
Making like a career
One guy
shift.
was in his 40s. Yeah. I mean, like at the time. So
I've seen that, man. I worked with a guy at one department I was at, and a great dude. And he was, I want to say he was in insurance or something like that for 20 plus years. And he just goes, always wanted to be a cop. And at like 45 years old, became a cop. He was a damn good one, too.
Yeah.
Like, the guy was a solid cop, man. And, like, it was just one of those things. He was like, no, I had a whole life before this,
yeah,
you know?
if you got good life experience, it
makes a huge difference.
It's helpful.
Yeah. And I also, too, I mean, he would show up on scene. He was an older gentleman.
Yeah.
And, like, people would just gravitate to him.
Yeah.
Because, like, he looked senior. He's got 6 months on the job, but he looks senior. He looks like the guy you go to for answers. You know what I mean?
Right.
He had the Tom Selleck. You know, he's good to go. Yeah, man. So you get there, boom. You were on the job for what, a total of 11, 12 years?
Yeah, I mean, like counting time in the academy, and I mean, I was full time in the academy, so I mean, like, I left full time policing in June of 2017.
Right on.
And then went part time from there at a couple of different departments until June of 2020, July of 2020.
Awesome. So the question everybody was going to want to hear, how did Mike the Cop become a thing? What was the inspiration for you to get on a camera and be like, let's have a little fun with this?
It started way before the camera. It started as a blog, actually.
Really?
Yeah. I made a website. I decided that I wanted to share thoughts, right? And again, because it goes back to like, what do you like to do?
Mm-hmm.
I like to read, write, argue, talk, philosophize, you know, like that's brings me joy. Like I love it. So, I tested the waters. I was like, I really want to write about some of my thoughts and experiences in law enforcement.
Okay.
And so, I wrote something, I shared it, and it was like super well received. So I put together two things. One is I did a website, coplife.net.
Right on. Okay.
And it was just my blog, basically. And then I launched a Facebook group called Cop Life. And just had cops coming into Facebook groups. And that was like the beginning of the heyday of Facebook, you know. And so had people hopping into there. And I just continued to write. And that writing led me to, there was a couple of websites, whether it was like kind of Police One, Law Enforcement Today. There was another one that was big for a while called Uniform Stories. Yep. I started getting requests to write for some of these publications.
That's awesome.
And so I started doing that. So there was a lot of that going on before anybody ever knew who I was.
Right.
I didn't use my real name. I just published my pieces as Mike the Cop.
So that's awesome.
So I wasn't very creative with it. I was just like, whatever, you know, like, I was writing or engaging on Facebook. I wasn't making videos. I wasn't even posting pictures of myself. Like I was just like, whatever.
You state an opinion about something you experienced, and then you get feedback and kind of have like a forum going with people, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like
a Facebook
Q&A, like boom, going back.
Just sharing funny memes, just cop stuff. At that time, then I met another lady online. She had written an article that went massively viral called Dear Officer, We See You, that kind of a thing. And
I remember that.
It was everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I reached out to her like, hey, I really appreciated your writing. She's like, oh, I appreciate your writing. Like, and that struck up a connection. And she had started this thing called Humanizing the Badge. Mm. So both of us had these Facebook groups. Both of us were writing. Long story short, we decided to merge that all into one thing as Humanizing the Badge. So it was me, her, and a couple other people early on. And so we merged our Facebook groups, and pretty soon we had, a 30-some thousand Facebook group. Our posts would reach hundreds of thousands of people. And we didn't know what we were doing other than like, we should do something good. She had her kid had medical issues of all sorts of things going on. And her husband at the time was a SWAT guy for Amarillo. And so we were like, well, we could raise money to help cop families with medically challenged kids. We could do something good with this.
Right.
You know, it quickly turned into like, well, we got to do something with this. We can't, it's not just like, look at us. We want to do something.
For sure.
And that's when we collated our writings, put them in a coffee table book, and we started building this organization. And then we met in Dallas, I think it was. And that's when, at the time, my kids were showing me videos on Vine of this guy, Officer Daniels. And so we were like, well, how can we get more eyes on what we're doing? And I'm like, well, we could try to do what this guy's doing.
Yeah.
I mean, like, this seems to be working. And so I just made a video. And then I woke up the next morning and it had gone viral.
Really?
And then I made another one and it did the same thing. And then I was like, okay,
We got something here.
well, I guess I could just keep doing that. And that was in 2015. So I had almost 2 years of not being in front of the camera or whatever.
Building all of this up. Yeah.
And that's one of those things where people are like, well, it must be nice for you to be able to just like.
Don't you love those 3 words?
It's like, yeah, there was a lot that went into this way before that ever happened,
idea.
You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, we saw tremendous growth there. And then in 2016, it was February of 2016, I decided like I didn't want the Mike the Cop thing to be like synonymous with humanizing the badge. I didn't want it to be the Mike show. Like, so I created a separate account that was like Mike the Cop. So that month I launched my Facebook page, YouTube channel, that kind of stuff.
Right.
It's like, this is me, and I want to humanize the badge. So go there for that stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I'm pointing you to this organization. So yeah, that was how Mike the Cop kicked off.
And then over 1 million on Facebook. You've been shadow banned several times on Instagram, or you'd be over 1 million there, but you're a few 100,000 on Instagram still currently, and over 600,000 on YouTube subscription before.
I don't know. Law enforcement today took over my YouTube channel. 500,000, 500,000
Incredible,
thousand subscribers before I turned that over.
That's amazing, man. Absolutely amazing. All because you just kind of like, well, you know what? Let's give this a shot.
Right.
Yeah, you know. And ever bother you being on the camera, or ever nervous, or you were just like, whatever, let's do this?
I don't really get nervous about that stuff. I mean, I'm actually an introvert, but I don't get nervous. Like I've never been nervous to speak in front of my class at school. Never been nervous to speak in front of I wouldn't get nervous about speaking to a stadium full of people.
Right.
I don't know what it is.
It just doesn't.
If that's a normal feature of people, I didn't get that. I'm
me neither.
I'm defective. In that sense,
me neither,
right?
man. It's never bothered me. I can walk into any room, any place. I think that's what part of what makes you a good cop as well, though. Doing the job, you have to be able to walk into a room and, for lack of a better term, command that room.
Yeah.
Take control of it. Do what you need to do. And if you're shaking on the inside, people are going to notice that. So it's never bothered me. Even back in like elementary school, things like that, it's like reading in front of the class or something like that. Sure. No problem. Never really had that, oh man, the stage fright fear, you know.
Yeah.
I kind of attribute that to my dad forcing me to pee in the trough at Joe Louis. You know, when I wanted to go in the stall, he's like, "Step on up, boy."
Yeah, that's Tiger,
you're gonna get over
Tiger
that gun
Stadium for
You're gonna get over that gun shyness right now. I was like 5.
Yeah.
So yes, you can't get nervous, you know. Man, oh man, it's an incredible story, Mike. You know, and we're not even scratching the surface yet. I want to get. Most people know that about you, right? Not how you got there, but when they see your content and they see it, and like obviously some of the comedy videos, man. I remember. I'll tell this quick story real quick before we get back. I was working local department. You were working at your last department, and you did a warrant pickup with one of my buddies. None of us knew you were a local guy. We thought you were just this like famous dude who like was somewhere in wherever, California, Florida, whatever. Right. And he goes and does a warrant pickup with you. And he arrests the guy in your guys' warrant. He's meeting you somewhere, and we're getting off midnight shift. It's like 6:30, right? So you can tell how upset you were about this.
Right. I'm sure.
Dude, he pulls up. gets out of the car, you know, and he hands you the prisoner. You start searching the guy. You pull out a pack of Newports, and you're like, Newports, huh? Typical. And he said it, and this guy is like in awe of you. You get out of the car, and he looks at you, and he says, "This is how he tells the story." He goes, "Dude, you're Mike the cop," and you're like, "Yeah, what do you got, man?" Like, I want to go home. Like, what do you? He's like, "Oh yeah, I got this guy. Whatever." He's all right, cool. He says, "You pull out the Newports, huh? Typical." That's one of my favorite lines. So forever after,
Sounds about right.
Before I ever knew you, before I ever met you, we would say that to guys when we were searching them because we thought it was hilarious.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, dude. Newports, huh? Typical.
That's awesome.
We carried that around, bro. It's hilarious. But yeah, we all thought you were like, we didn't know you were a local
Metro
dude.
Detroit cigarette special.
Yeah, dude. We didn't know you were a local dude. So he came back. He goes, I just met Mike the cop. I'm like, isn't that guy in like Cali or something? He goes, no, he works for such and such. I'm like, no way.
That's funny.
And then we end up linking up, you know, some years later, you and I on the jiu-jitsu mats. But yeah, man, that's awesome. So you had started the humanizing the badge and all that. Was that prior to your brother's incident?
No, I was way after.
Was it after? Okay.
Yeah, because my brother was shot in 2010.
Oh my goodness, it's
So
been that long.
I was like pretty new cop.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't on FTO anymore or anything like that. But so yeah, I was very new to the job. All those guys were taking bets on whether or not I'd even come back.
Really?
Yeah. So yeah, that happened in 2010. So and that was kind of like what part of what, like my experience from going from brand new cop. You know, they tell you in the academy you're going to lose people that you love, that you know that you're close friends or whatever. They try to. They can't really prepare you, but they
do their best.
They let you know, hey, that you're stepping into a career where there's going to be some loss here.
Absolutely.
You know?
I've seen people walk out in that conversation where they're just you know.
So part of the motivation in terms of wanting to write or do something was, I think, in some sense, twofold. One was like it was cathartic for me. It was a good thing for me to write my thoughts about these things. And then two, it was also a way to give back because there was like a sense of which the law enforcement community was very good to me, you know, through that experience. And it was my best attempt at a thank you, you know, like giving back in that sense. So yeah, that was a lot of the reasoning behind my kind of like start to share those things. Yeah.
Right on, man. Right on. All right, man. So here we go. We're at, what should we dive into next? I think children. I think this would be very. I'd love to hear your perspective on this. You had 4 children when you started on the job.
Yep.
Were they were all born and kind of coming up a little bit. And because your oldest is how old now? Because I know you have now 4 grandchildren.
4
4 grandchildren now. Yeah. And your oldest is 30? Coming up on 30.
Not quite. Yeah.
Late 20s?
27, she'll be 30.
Beautiful. Okay. What was that like for you when you made that decision, I'm going to go into this career field, and you had them at home or your wife at home? Was that ever a thought for you? Were you concerned in any way about like being separate from them because of shift work or anything like that? Or was it just kind of like, you know what, this is my calling for this season of my life?
Yeah, no, I felt really confident. It was one of those things where, because I was around a lot of police officers when I worked in loss prevention.
Right.
Every time I caught a shoplifter,
you're having
meeting
contact
a cop,
with them.
right?
Exactly.
So I was always there. And some of the guys that I had been doing that private work with went into policing, and you know, so I'm like, I see these guys and they really like what they're doing. Then my brother, who also worked at Meyer, became a cop. He started in Detroit, and then so I saw him, how he loved it, you know. And it's one of those things where like my dad was a dispatcher in Illinois for Champaign-Urbana Fire Department and stuff like that. So like I grew up with a scanner in the house, and so there was always sort of like this, man, that would be cool to do.
For sure.
And so, I don't know, once I made the decision, the decision was made.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it was like, okay,
here we go. Yeah, we're doing
whatever.
this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I got
absolutely.
to work my shift, but
Yeah.
I'm not working my shift. I'm not, then I'm home, so it's fine.
Yeah. You were able to, you and I have had this conversation off camera, and I've always appreciated this about you, your ability to separate. You said you could get off shift and you were home. And you didn't,
Yeah, I don't feel like
you never really were
ever
that guy who
struggled
was
with
like, I gotta
needing to
I gotta
carry
decompress, or I gotta spend an hour in my driveway before I go in the house, things like that. That's pretty incredible, man. 'Cause I know a lot of guys that struggle with that, especially with their children, and also guys that let the dark side of the job ruin their marriages. And like we've talked about that, how some of the best cops I ever knew were on their second, third, fourth marriages. And it's like, they were fantastic at the job, but they weren't holding up their calling, their duty on the other side.
Yeah.
And I always, even as a young man, a young cop, I was addicted to the chaos of the job. I loved it. I alcohol, adrenaline, and women, right? I lived in this just like barbaric sense of sin. And I'm so convicted by it now, being a husband and being a father and having people like you in my life. I get emotional, man, because like I had to murder that person to be this one. And I'm beyond proud of that. Because the man that I don't ever think I was a bad man, but I made bad decisions, selfish bad decisions over and over again. And I very much was addicted to that like wannabe rock star lifestyle of a cop. And I met my wife after a very dark period in my life where I contemplated taking my own life. And I prayed and I prayed and I prayed, and I said, I need your help. I need a way out of this, God, And I met my wife 6 months later. In the interim, in that 6 months, there was a drastic change in just the way I looked at the world, the way I looked at life, And then I met her, and then a short time later, we're married, pregnant on our honeymoon with our first son. We just had our second son, and I look back at that, and when I hear you talk about your ability to be such a present husband and a present father while doing that job, it amazes me. I think I'm not quite sure I could have done that. I think that in my mind and the way that I operated then, the job always came first. Sure. I didn't realize that until I separated myself from it. And that's something that I really like. When I had Tex on the show, and he married Lindsay and I, and they've been married for almost 40 years now. One of the best street cops I've ever known. But he did it. 2 sons, 1 wife, God first. He did it, and like I always admire that about you guys, man, because I let the dark side get in,
Yeah. I don't think I'm anything special by any means. I just think like it was helpful that I came into the career knowing what life was like without policing.
Yeah.
That's
a good point, man.
A lot of these guys that I trained as an FTO or whatever, they went to high school, they went to college, they worked part-time jobs maybe. Mommy and daddy covered them.
Yep.
And they get out with their CJ degree and come work as a cop.
Yeah.
And this is their first real job. This is their first thing. And so they don't know anything different.
No, and you dive headfirst into that culture.
Yeah.
With certain mentors, right? Like that will take a young mind and be like, this is what we do. And then you deal with something bad, or you have a rough day or rough, shootings, whatever. And then like, what do? We go to the bar.
Yeah.
We stifle this down. I was never invited to church. I'll tell you that. You know what I mean? And the guys wanted to hold church in the parking lot with a case of beer and a fifth of whatever was on.
They had choir practice.
Yeah. that was that,
Yeah. I wasn't, and I want to make sure people know, like, I'm not trying to, I'm certainly not posturing as like some, perfect example.
No,
like,
of course not.
I definitely had my share of struggles and giving in to some of those things too, through the years, for any number of reasons. But yeah, I mean, God is good, and
absolutely,
bringing me through that. I think faith is obviously a clear thing that cut through a lot of the noise for me.
Absolutely.
But yeah, knowing that I had responsibilities at home, and I already had. I mean, my youngest daughter was born in 2003, so I mean, that was 6 years.
Right.
I mean, of having 4 kids before I ever did that.
Stepped
So, like,
in the uniform. Right?
yeah. So that had a bigger of a gravitational pull and movement than a new job.
Right.
To me,
For
you
sure.
know. I viewed it as a job that I enjoyed, a job that I loved, a job that I was proud of.
But you didn't
That
make
I
it
don't
your whole
regret,
identity.
but it wasn't. I kind of did with Mike the Cop in one sense, right? Like
That is funny though, right?
it's like
But you were able to still
I've
separate.
said that before
Yeah.
online. Like you can't make it your identity, and it's like that's funny coming from a guy who calls himself
handle
Mike the Cop. Like, yeah, I mean, touche, I get it. Like,
Right.
yeah, but even though the name was there, like in reality, I didn't need to be that guy all the time or whatever. So
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Your time in law enforcement, obviously you guys stayed, you were still attached to a local church with your family, and did you continue in ministry kind of like?
no, I pretty much was out of any type of like actual ministry role almost the entire time I was in policing. Yeah, I mean we attended church still.
Right. Faith stayed strong, but you weren't teaching.
Yeah, no, I had no teaching roles, no nothing at all.
Right on.
During that time. Yeah.
And then I know as of really recently, since I've known you, I've seen that pull for like in your life where you've really made your shift. Like, I mean, you're a serial entrepreneur. We can talk about your businesses and all that great stuff. But that pull I've seen in you, even just in the few years that I've known you, where you're like, I'm doing this and I'm going to provide this way, but I have to I like your pastoral pull. I want to talk about that because like that's been like I feel like it's always been there for you, but over the last couple of years, like just the way you move and the way you operate, and even the way you present your content on social media, you're always been unapologetic about your faith, which I love. But you're very much like this is what I'm doing. I want to share this with you. If you don't like it, that's okay. We can talk about it. I don't want you to leave, but if you do, you do. You know, it is what it is. You know, when did you feel that he hit you with that hammer again, where it's like, this is what I want from you now. Like, you need to talk about me now.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there was, I think God gifts people and calls them to things. And for me, teaching on some level is that gift. And I started getting a sense again in like 2022 where I was like, I've really Paul tells Timothy in the New Testament, don't neglect the gift that is in you and to fan it into flame. And I was like, man, I've really, I haven't walked away from my faith, but I'm also not, I'm not actively engaged in using the gift that I think God has given me. And so probably 2022 when things started to really be like, all right, I need to start taking some active steps toward being obedient to this. And so it's been an interesting ride through that process. And ultimately over 2 years of trying to fan that flame and get it going again, then it led to this position that I have at a church now. And still trying to kind of make sense of it all and just kind of be along for the ride that what God's doing. So
I love it, man. Yeah, that's incredible, dude. When you're there now in at Redemption in Monclova, you have, what is your head pastor's name? I'm sorry.
Stephen Whitlow.
Stephen. So he actually is another small world thing, God thing, always, a friend of my parents' very close friends. And they're from Sylvania, Ohio.
All right.
And he used to preach at their former church, wherever he was before when he was much younger.
Yeah, Cedar Creek.
Yes. And they've known him since, as my dad's buddy would say, knee high to a grasshopper. And when I went down to hear you preach, I posted on Instagram that I was down there with you, and then they both texted me. They're like, we know him, we used to, and I'm like, no way. I'm like, that's my buddy Mike, who's like, that's amazing. Stephen's wonderful, you know. I'm like, just this crazy small world, man. How like these circles are intertwined like that. You know? That's beautiful, man. Let's get into. I want to ask you, since I'm a new father, what were some things that helped you help your children navigate this world when they were tender aged? I know it's a deep, heavy question, and I'm sure there's a million things going through your mind. I know things were slightly different 20 years ago. You know, the devil wasn't just out to play like he is now, but I don't fear it by any means, but I think about it daily, how I'm going to help my sons navigate this world, and especially now that I've, not to sound like cheesy, but a new creation in Christ. So he created a new heart in me. Yeah. I'm a different person. So I look at the things that I grew up with, and I look at these worldly things, and I'm like, okay, man, how do I help them kind of separate the two and walk through this? And because they got to do it on their own at some point,
Yeah.
But
it's a good question. It is very big. It's a very big topic. Our kids need Christ, man. That's it. That's who they need more than anything. And so the question becomes, well, how do you give that to them? Mm-hmm. I think it's train up a child in the way he should go. And I think that train part, and I think that's something that you could relate to because you've trained, right? A lot of people don't think about training the same way, but I think you'll get this in terms of training to become a police officer, mm-hmm. training to learn how to box, mm-hmm. training to learn how to grapple, right? There's and even in the New Testament, the Bible says that the scriptures are all these different things, but they're sufficient for training in righteousness. Mm-hmm. And so there's this idea that we must train our children for navigating life. Mm-hmm. We need a process for that. You see all the time people I wish I would have learned how to pay my taxes, but instead I was playing Old MacDonald on the recorder or whatever.
Right.
It's
right.
Thanks a lot, school.
Yeah, exactly.
It's teach me these things, right? Mm-hmm. And there's certainly a reality that if you don't train your kids, they're going to be trained.
Exactly.
Right? Vadi Bakum says this thing where it's don't send your kids off to get educated by Caesar and be surprised when they come back as Romans.
Exactly. Well, what a beautiful quote. That guy's incredible.
Yeah.
But what a beautiful quote, because it's so true. Even for a non-Christian, I've said that quote to some people that I know that don't really have the same Christian views that we have, and they're like, "Well, I agree with that."
Yeah.
You can see the light bulb kind of go off in their head a little bit when you put it that way.
Yeah. So we can't turn the keys over to other people to raise our kids.
Couldn't agree more.
And I think there's not always one right answer, mm-hmm.
Of course not.
But that principle, mm-hmm. I think if someone embraces it and says, I need to give my kids Christ above all.
Absolutely.
That Christ is king, and that is who we follow. Mm-hmm. That's our ultimate allegiance. And I'm going to train my kids to do that. Now, there's ways to do that, right? Praying, mm-hmm. scripture reading, mm-hmm. scripture memory, catechism. There's all sorts of, I wouldn't call them necessarily tactics, but that's a training. A training follows a path, a plan.
Right. Of course.
Right. And so, put some thought into what do I want my kids to know when they head off into the world to navigate it themselves? And I always viewed, for better, for worse, right or wrong, I had somebody that was of influence to me basically tell me your job is done by the time they're 16. 18's this legal adult kind of a thing. You're done. You've done what you're going to do by that time, mm-hmm. especially today. So the question would be, for my encouragement to young men raising families, would be, what do I want my kids to know how do I want them to be living by that point?
Right.
And then you gotta kind of reverse engineer your plan. And again, I don't think that there's like one perfect plan for that,
not.
But I do think like putting thought into
Yes.
it to say I have to train them. It's not just gonna happen.
No.
Kids aren't
Just
gonna
get the forefront
learn
of your mind.
like by osmosis. There has to be clear both example and instruction, right? And they need
Perfectly
they
said.
need to be
You have to be able to.
they need to be the same.
Watch you, right?
they
Like
need to be the same
yes.
because the instruction won't hold if the example doesn't hold, and if an example holds without the instruction, then they're still open and susceptible to other instruction as alternative ways.
It can't be do as I say, not as I do, right? Like that old saying. Like they have to look to you, and
For sure.
what you're teaching them is in line with how you live your life.
Yeah.
Right. When people say, they should see Christ in you, right?
Right.
Your children should see that, and as who you speak, you're teaching them these things, right? And if you're not like, hey man, eat your vegetables, as I'm chugging down Doritos in a 6-pack, right? Am I just because I said so?
Yeah.
Right. Like, it's
Yeah. Although I do think that because I said so is an actual valid reason.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Like at some point in time, they need to understand.
For
I
sure.
don't owe you an explanation.
Yeah.
I'm your father. She's your mother.
Yeah.
Because I said so is
Yeah.
all you're getting.
Yeah. Because I said so is actually like, I know that a lot of pop psychology, modern psychology says that's bad. Well, it's only sometimes bad, right?
It can be abused.
It needs
right?
to start
like
there,
anything.
right? It needs to start there. My 3-year-old isn't going to understand my explanation of anything.
Right.
So it is because I said so. And that same guy that kind of talked to me about, your kids are pretty much formed and ready to face the world by 16.
Yeah, they're mini adults.
I think treating kids like they're more mature faster than the world does, because now I see kids that are 18, 19 years old. They don't have their driver's license. They're not ready to face the world because they've been kind of coddled along.
Absolutely.
And I think that we need to kind of recover a little bit more of a higher expectation sooner of our kids. But he kind of drew this graph where the younger, like the highest level of discipline is at the youngest age, right? Where you are in total command of that child, right? At new birth, you are 100% the disciplinarian.
Mm-hmm.
You're caretaker, everything,
Absolutely.
right? You're not even remotely a friend to them or anything. You are that is the highest level of discipline you'll ever have, is like you are completely dominant over this life, right? And then that graph, like it goes down
as they
get older, right? So your level of forced discipline should be next to none by the time they're ready to face the world, because you've trained them and prepared them to be self-disciplined when they get there, right? So I thought that always has stuck with me.
I love that.
And so I tried to kind of do that with my kid. I certainly didn't do a perfect job. I'm sure.
No,
March any one of my kids in here, and they'll recount any number of my failures or inconsistencies or.
Absolutely.
we're all hypocrites in a bunch of different ways, and myself as included in that. But that stuck with me as a.
I love that, man. That's a beautiful place to start for anybody who listens, is willing to take heed to your words. That's a beautiful place to start. I think setting the example, you have to live it. I think that and try to be. I say now I try to be as I'm learning scripture, and I try to be as biblically sound as I can. And what God describes as a man is my goal for my manhood and my masculinity, to be a godly man and to live in that example. So that way, when my sons look at me and they look at their mother, they understand how a man is supposed to treat a woman, how a man is supposed to conduct himself, and that we don't absorb to the ways of this world. We have to navigate around it, but we don't. You will stand out, but you'll stand out for the right reasons. If that's the case, right? If the world's against you, no problem, man. You're gonna do what's right and what we're called to do. That's my mentality on it. I think as we learn and we get older, especially as type A males with sons, I will have to learn how to not be so aggressively hard on them. Give them a little bit of grace, And I think I'm grateful that I'm 35. I had my first son 33, and now Gabriel at 30, right before I turned 35, and it's I'm a little older, a little more mature. If I would have had children at 23 and 25, I'm not quite sure what kind of, well, for one, I know the example hopefully would have changed with children, right? Because they change you, they should. But I think that I'm much more patient, and I have a little bit more of an understanding of, he's 2. He's going to do,
right.
He's not going to listen to you immediately. We have to correct these things, but I don't got to go off the handle every time he spills some juice or something. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I think about those things a lot. And my father's a great man. I wouldn't trade him for anything. He's a difficult man to please, but I'm grateful for that because it helped mold me and my brother into who we are,
Yeah.
But seeing him with his grandchildren is funny. How soft and gentle, My father was not soft and not gentle, But never raised a hand to us.
But
which
we grow. Like if I had the ability to communicate but I am who I am now.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't this. I didn't have the cumulative knowledge and experience and attitude that I have now back then. Right. It is a different ball game. And so for me, I look at how when my grandkids are over and they start acting a kind of way or whatever that is out of line with what I'm interested in the moment.
Right.
How I respond now, well, it's kind of like, well, I'm not their parent. Right. So I do have to respond in a little bit of a different way because I'm not the parent. Right. But I've found my ability to extend patience and grace more than when I was a parent is there. Like my ability to use calmness as a tool is way better now than it was then as well. So
that's beautiful.
So,
like that's growth.
You grow, right? Like your dad never stopped growing and changing either.
Right.
It's just you're growing. He grew too in that time in some way.
It's cool to see for me, because we always had a great relationship. It wasn't like my dad was some asshole or something. That wasn't that at all. He's just a hard man. That's it. He had expectations. You were going to do what he expected of you, and that was that. Yeah. And he rewarded us. It wasn't like it was just like iron fist and I'll never tell you I love you. Right. But it was, you had expectations, and he's a blue collar, hardworking man. And it's just like, come home from work, you're going to do what I tell you to do. Is your homework done? Is this done? Whatever I saw you dogging it at practice. What's that about? Yeah. You know what I mean? You're finishing that. That guy's not faster than you. He's beating you in the hundreds. What's that about? He'd call you out on stuff like that, and I look back on it at the time like, damn, man, ain't nothing ever good enough, man. I'm out here working my ass off. He doesn't care. It's like, no, I look at it now as a father. I'm like, no, he really cared. Yeah. And that's why he's like, you're better than that. Don't ever, like you give it all you got, period. Yeah. Anything you're going to do, I don't care if you're flipping hamburgers, be the best they can be at it, When I see him with his grandsons, it cracks me up. Come here, baby. Come here to Papa. Come here to Papa. I'm like, he got more hugs in an hour than I got my whole life. He's like, oh, stop, man. I love it. I named Linz and I named our first son after him, It's beautiful to watch. And then I have my father-in-law is a wonderful man, and it's cool to watch them both, because my dad's dad died when he was 11 years old. And my mom's dad, he was around until I was 15, but he had Alzheimer's real bad, like my whole life. So it was very different, And then by the time he passed away, they had to put him in a home and all that stuff. Right. He was a professional boxer and he fought in World War II. So so it was, he had plenty of head trauma. Right.
Yeah, I guess so.
And but they tell my uncles tell cool stories about him. My nana would always talk about him. He was a man's man. I got a really cool picture I'll show you of him. He was like in his mid-30s, early 40s, and they found his old trunks. And he put them on just to show that he still could wear them. He's flexing, and he still got just like he was a beast, It's incredible. But I think about those things and like, the men that we come from. Yeah, we take what we learn from them and their mistakes. Learning from their mistakes along with the great things that they did, and trying to mold that into my children. Yeah.
That's why it's important to point your kids to Christ.
Absolutely,
because
number one.
I think being open and honest with your kids, as they can understand it, right, is like, yeah, Dad is not going to be perfect, but we follow one who is, right? Exactly. So like, I'm not going to be able to meet your every need. I can't be there forever, but there's one who is. I can't give you all the answers every time. I don't know, but there's one who does, right? So
I love that.
Constantly pointing kids back to Christ. I mean, you can make a lot of mistakes and God's Spirit can fill a lot of gaps.
Yes, absolutely. Any void there. Yeah, absolutely, man. I think that's amazing. That's amazing. Oh, what else, Mike? Man, what do we? I want to end with what you're doing now. I know we're on the pastoral journey. But what are we doing with your businesses?
I wish I knew.
And listen, man, I have no idea. All right, I'm not sure what we're doing after this.
Yeah,
So we're crushing real estate. Been crushing real estate for how many years now?
I got my real estate license. I think. I don't know when I officially got it. I know I started the classes in the summer of 2017.
Right on.
I don't know how. Like, it took me a while, so it might have been 2018 when I actually got my license. I don't know. Yeah. So the real estate thing happened, and I kind of figured that out for myself. Then we started the 10-7 project to try to help cops and veterans, public safety types, be able to start and grow real estate businesses. On their own or, together with us. And so that started in 2020. And then 2021, I started the process of 2022 getting licensed for mortgages, and which now I've kind of fallen into as I've kind of got two things going on at once. Like if it's like real estate and mortgages as like a business,
right?
In general, I don't do too much as far as like actual real estate transactions anymore. I pretty much just refer that out,
right? But you do a lot of the private coaching.
Yeah, do a lot of the coaching
for if they're in the business or want to get into the business, they can reach out to you for that guidance,
and then doing the mortgage thing, but
which we've done several transactions together, and you are by far the best. I'm not saying it because you're sitting here. You get it done, man, and that's something to be said in this business, right? Yeah. Because there's a low barrier of entry. We all know that.
There indeed is. So so like my hope for the future is that I can continue to grow. I'm not. For me, mortgages and real estate is just a vehicle.
Yes.
It's a niche that I'm applying my skill set to. I could apply the same skill set to pretty much anything, and maybe I will one day as my interests grow, change, develop, whatever. I'm just not a big believer. I'm a big believer in consistency in terms of putting in the work and living up to your responsibilities. But I don't buy into like that moment that we kind of talked about earlier when I like realized I could break free from that cubicle.
Right.
I'm sure my in-laws thought I was absolutely insane.
Oh, absolutely.
At different points, like what are they doing? Is my daughter gonna be able to eat? Whatever. Yeah. Like, but
all the same things that keep people in that that little space.
So for me, people are like, well, what do you do? Yeah, it's like, well, I do whatever I want.
Exactly, man. I love that.
Let's do whatever I want.
Response ever.
Like
an entrepreneur, I do whatever I want.
Yeah,
whatever I'm passionate about, wherever he calls me, I go.
Yeah, so I'm trying to build those skills. No one can take that from me.
Right.
The skills that have been necessary to get to where I'm at, no one can take those from me. So I can apply them any way that I want. I do see more ministry stuff in the future, and all things being equal, if money wasn't an object, I would want to train jiu-jitsu and do ministry.
Yeah, right. Jesus and jiu-jitsu.
And go to the beach.
Yeah.
These are the things like, I'm like, this is like that. And well, I would read books and argue with people. Yeah. Like it's like, these are like, this is my life if I didn't need money. Right. So I keep kind of striving for how can I build something that creates steady residual income based on my skills. And so I see myself trying to build a business in a way that by helping others succeed in these areas, as I've kind of learned my own way, how can I help pass that on? Can I grow that in a way that continues to generate business, like ideas, vision, and help others on the execution piece? And even for me now, like I'm at a point to where I realize the ceiling that I've hit is because now I am the bottleneck. One person can only do so much, right? So when you're doing to generate revenue, once you get to the level you can do, you're done, right? So now I'm in this phase where I'm like, okay, well, if I want to build something bigger or more to generate more resources to do more things that are fulfilling for me, then what does that look like? And that's sort of like the season that I'm in now. You know, I don't want to be sitting at the computer knee deep in a mortgage file.
Absolutely not.
But you know, I building teams and systems that can support future growth is kind of where I'm at right now, hopefully.
Love it, brother. I love it, man. Well, dude, that was, as I knew it would be, an amazing conversation, man. Thank you for always being so open with who you are, your knowledge. I appreciate it. I can't thank you enough for everything you've done for Linz and I and for our boys. Meeting you has changed my life. I'm not saying it because you're
That's intense.
I sincerely, man. I love you. I love you. You're my brother. I have learned and will continue to learn a tremendous amount from you, not just as a businessman, but as a husband and as a father. I truly look up to you in all those realms, and I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me, dude. It's it's an honor, bro. Sincerely.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah. And I'm gonna throw one more curveball at you, and you got to end us with prayer.
Oh yeah, cool. God, you are God and we are not. And so all that we have is from you. And we just we commit our lives, our families, our futures into your hands, and trusting that you know the end from the beginning. And we pray to God that we would, with all the strength that you give us, live into that and maximize the opportunities before us for the good of others and your glory. In your name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, my brother.
Yeah, buddy.